So, what we're going to look at today is the impact of World War One on Germany. So, on the 29th of September 1918, the Chief of Staff of the German Army, General Ludendorff, informed his boss, Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg, that the war was lost, that Germany had lost World War One. This is important because they are the two military leaders of Germany. Both of them go on to be important figures in Weimar Germany. Ludendorff as an early member of the Nazi Party, Hindenburg as the president who appoints Adolf Hitler as chancellor, and both of them are part of the stab in the back myth, the Dolchstoß, that we'll look at soon. So Ludendorff said that Germany should appeal to the United States for an armistice. He also argued that Germany should reform along democratic lines. This was in order to secure favourable terms from the United States and the Western Allies to prove that they were serious about making peace. So, the impact of World War One, firstly, on the German people. So, in October of 1918, beginning of November 1918, there were major food shortages throughout Germany. This was the impact of the naval blockade on Germany. But morale in Germany in some quarters was still, optimism for the war was still quite high. Of course, in October of 1917, they'd successfully defeated Russia, so they were now fighting a war on just one front. And they were still fighting in northern France. They hadn't been pushed out of France yet by the Allies. Propaganda was repeatedly telling Germans that the war was going well and that victory was in sight. So there was reason to believe in Germany that the war was going okay. So when the surrender came, the Navy, when it was imminent, the Navy disagreed. They tried to send their fleet out to sea, and there was, of course, the huge naval mutiny at Kiel. This led to the creation of many Russian or Soviet-style Soviets across German cities. So that fear of communism started to intensify, it started to increase in Germany. So we're going to move on and we'll look at the political impact of Germany's defeat in World War One. So as we've looked at, on the 9th of November 1918, the Kaiser was convinced to abdicate. He wasn't given a choice in this. He didn't have an option. He didn't go willingly. The press release that he was abdicating actually went out before he officially abdicated. So in his place was a Council of Representatives. So this was a temporary government led by Friedrich Ebert, who was a member of the SPD, so he was a democratic socialist. They replaced the Kaiser until a National Assembly or Parliament was going to be elected. So, as I say, Ebert was from the SPD. He was a moderate, democratic, socialist politician. And his key aim was to try to avoid a revolution in Germany. And this was for three reasons. Firstly, he wanted to avoid a civil war. Secondly, he wanted to avoid any disruptions of food, of the distribution of food across Germany. And thirdly, he felt that a civil war would hinder or hamper peace negotiations. So he was successfully able to avert a civil war and also a revolution, despite the fact that these Soviets were springing up across Germany. And the reason he was able to avert a revolution was, again, down to three reasons. So firstly, he managed to maintain the support of the army. He didn't reform them, he didn't interfere in their business. Secondly, he kept the support of industrialists who negotiated with trade unions. So it was the introduction of a number of reforms that kept workers happy and stopped them from rebelling, such as an 8-hour working day and the creation of workers' councils to negotiate on terms and conditions with employers. And thirdly, the working class were divided. They were divided between the radical communists who wanted a Soviet or Russian-style system and democratic socialists like Ebert who wanted democracy. So we're going to move on to the third effect of the war on Germany, the economic impact. So the war had a huge impact on Germany economically. And again, this is down for four reasons. So firstly, industrial production was down. It was about 2/3 of the level in 1918 that it had been at in 1913. Secondly, the national income was down. The national income was about a third of what it had been it was about a third in 1918 of what it had been in 1913. Thirdly, there were about 600,000 widows because of the deaths of German soldiers. There were 2 million children who didn't have fathers. So in 1925, 1/3 of all government spending was on war pensions for these widows. And fourthly, debt. Germany didn't increase their taxes to pay for the war. Their big master plan was to win the war and then enforce reparations on the defeated powers. Didn't work when they lost the war themselves. So that's the economic impact. The next theme we're going to look at is the social impact. So the war deepened divisions within German society as the gap between the rich and the poor appeared and did grow. So during the war, factory owners managed to make for themselves huge sums of money. Their profits went up with armament production, despite the fact that restrictions were placed on wages. So this was known as war profiteering, and this is something that the Nazis and other nationalist parties have a big appeal on. They claim that these industrialists that profited during the war were ultimately Jewish, in the same way that the Soviets that sprung up in Germany were led by Jews. So many women worked in factories during the First World War, and this led to divisions. And again, it was a cause of contention when the war ended. Some wanted women's liberation. Others argued that this was leading towards the destruction of family values. So Germany needed to recover from the social impact of the war. This was something else that this new republic would need to do. And this is our final point, a new republic. So following the Kaiser's abdication on the 11th of November 1918, an armistice was signed by Ebert. The war did come to an end. And Ebert did so, saying that this new republic would guarantee three things. It would guarantee, firstly, freedom of speech, secondly, freedom of worship, and thirdly, better working conditions. So in order to put this into writing, a new constitution needed to be drawn up. But as this new republic sees, that transition from autocracy to dictatorship would open up many of the tensions which we have just examined.